Hi, everyone. Hi. I don't know if you can, everyone's getting their computer on. We let you in. Hi, Sandra. We let you in. I think, I don't know if we muted you or not, but. So
good,
this is mostly a housing call for parents that we do for parents and present the housing coalition moving forward. And I'm not the boss of it. I'm just, I imagine the leadership will get tossed from person to person in various months. But I'm just helping to pull it together, because as we register for these calls, we're saving your emails in a separate list, because Hawaii Autism Foundation happened to own a robust email program that will start a list for us. And before it was sort of a haphazard list. So we're happy about that. Sandra, if you don't mind, we're going to start the meeting with talking about the shared living, and then this model that we have with one tract of land with multiple housing. And then I'd love to introduce you at the end, because the disability community has never really worked or known, or we don't talk to the public housing arm of things before. We've really been separate arms. So it'd be really interesting just to introduce yourself and who your the head of your company is. And you said that she was part of a housing committee. So I'm just waiting for a few more people to join, and then I'll give a quick intro again. So hi everyone. Hi Patty. So Sandra, you're a parent too, so
yeah,
say
yes,
hi
I
to
am.
anyone you know. Yeah, and so I think, hi Kelly. So I will, I'll do an introduction, and then I'll just keep, my computer wants to update. I'll just keep letting people in as they come. So welcome everyone to the Housing Coalition. We're just keeping the momentum up, and I won't be the only one hosting this. Hopefully we'll be able to pass it ping pong back and forth to a core leadership moving forward with the Housing Coalition and gathering data. We do have Kelly Murphy listening in from the Center for Disability Studies. And we have a guest that's going to be talking to us at the end. We're going to keep the meeting tight, but at the end, Sandra Oshiro is going to talk to us. And she's a parent of an autistic young lady, but she also has a job in the nonprofit industry of public affordable housing. And so she's going to talk to us at the very end about that. And so we're going to start with the shared living idea. And we were hoping to have the gentleman here who actually graduated from Camp Hill, but Andrea has been working with him on her property. And Andrea Rodgers from Maui is going to share what he's bringing from Camp Hill Academy. Apparently he's only one of 4 graduates from Camp Hill Academy. I think I should change the view to the person talking, because I think it's speaker. Who are you seeing talking right now? Are you seeing me mostly?
Yes.
Okay. So Andrea is going to talk for a short time about shared housing. In the meantime, I'm going to try and forward her video. And then she's going to talk about a tract of land that she has on Maui that is a lot of us are excited about, because it's a tract of land where you can put multi ideas on this for different levels of care. So Andrea, do you want to start with the shared housing?
Sure.
So a little background, my autistic son is now 33. So, you know, around age 16, a lot of us parents kind of start wondering, well, I'm not immortal. What's going to happen? What's the plan? So I've been at this for about 15 years of discovering the best environment for my son and some of his friends. So we've gone the route of a licensed group home, and just became disinterested in the protocol of that group home when the management changed and the quality just wasn't what I was looking for anymore. So we kind of forged out on our own to try something different. So, you know, a little bit of background of what I've been thinking about leading into this concept of independent living is, I think, you know, we saw secluded housing, institutional housing kind of come to a closure in our lifetime. And then we moved into this concept of having a group home in a neighborhood and called it inclusion. And what I started to realize is what did I really want for my son? And my son, you know, he's not high functioning at all. He will never be able to not have a support person with him. So he's not, you know, say like a Down syndrome person who can be pretty independent in a lot of ways. He will never have a job. And but what I started realizing is what I wanted for my son was for him to have an ordinary life. And I talk about this concept of an ordinary life, leaving behind he's a special needs person. You know, what do we really ultimately want for our children? An ordinary life. What is, you know, or we call it a full life. What do we want for ourselves? Meaningful friendships, a healthy lifestyle, productive living. And I started realizing that the concept of a group home, while it may be the right for your child or for other people's children, and it is very much an option, I was ready for something more for my son. I wanted him to, I want to leave the concept of inclusion behind, because the concept of inclusion predicates there's still seclusion not too far away. So what if this ordinary life was beyond inclusion, where we're not even identifying that he's a special needs person? He's just a person living in the world. So we started exploring what some other people were doing, and we decided that we would give what we call independent living a try. So the makeup of the compound that we've put together for my son at this point, we have a half an acre, and we handpicked this half acre because it's private and down a dirt driveway, but yet it's walking distance to the post office and a handful of stores, and you know, the town of Haiku, if you know the town of Haiku in Maui, so that, you know, you could walk to the post office and not even cross a road, and have some independence. If my son certainly couldn't walk there by himself, but maybe someone else could. And so what we have going on in this independent living is my son is in a 4-bedroom home. He has 2 roommates. And everyone in the group home, and I call it group home, but it's not a licensed setting, it's just a home that we put together for him. So there's a guest room, and he has 2 roommates. Actually, right now he has 3 roommates. Someone just moved in, but I don't know if that person's necessarily going to stay a long time. But the key is every person living there pays rent. So the people in the home, everyone pays the same rent to live there. And one person works with him as a paid support person part of the time, and one person is just literally a roommate who's chosen to live in this house. And then there's my son, and then across the field, it's about, you know, like a 2-minute walk, is a 2-bedroom house that's a HUD approved property on the same property. It's the, you know, the Ohana. And there's a Down syndrome guy, and he's got a support person living in the 2-bedroom. So he qualifies for a 2-bedroom home. And then there's another 1-bedroom apartment on the property. In Maui County, they actually changed the laws about 2 Januaries ago, that if you have over 7,500 square feet, you can actually have 2 legal Ohanas, not short-term rentals, but long-term rentals. So we have a 1-bedroom apartment on the other side of the garage. That's part of the house, but it's kind of has its own separate entrance, own separate bathroom, own separate kitchenette. And there's a very, very challenging girl that gets 24/7 care in the 1-bedroom home. And she has someone that sleeps in the home with her every night, different people. She's visually impaired, deaf, has autism and Down syndrome. So she gets 24/7 one-on-one care, and she is in the 1-bedroom. But everybody comes together when they want to and has dinner together. So everybody on the compound is sharing their lives together in a life-sharing capacity. Now, aside from the one girl that has the overnight care, every person there pays rent for their either room, their HUD property, their 1-bedroom, and everyone's just choosing to live together, if you will, in a life-sharing capacity, trying to mimic an ordinary life where if you were in your 20s or 30s and you might have just had roommates.
Can I interrupt you, because I feel like we know a little bit more from all the talking, but what she's saying is that the care agencies can be separate from the housing. So let's say your child got accepted for Section 8 voucher, housing voucher, and they got a 2-bedroom housing voucher. Then somebody else could live in the 2nd bedroom, let's say that was a part-time PAB worker, but whether it was 1 or 2 bedrooms, another agency, you just like we do in the adult world. I have North Shore Mental Health Agency doing some of my daughter's PAB, and I have Kahamana doing some of my daughter's PAB. So the guardians of this lady who needs 24-hour care picked an agency. So Andrea, you're not in charge of the care at all.
No. So, well, in my son's situation, he is in the consumer directed program. So he does not have an agency. So we organize that. But now
for the girl,
she's with another agency completely. And they organize it, and she's got basically her own apartment. She has people that sleep in the home with her every night. But then she's welcome as much or as little as she wants to join in group dinners and to, play on the swings with the other people. But there's a couple things that this potential, first of all, there's more people living on this property that are typically abled than there are special needs people. So right away, there's a whole different social order taking place in a group home that might have 4 or 5 special needs people and maybe 1 staff member. And so right away, there's actually, we were laughing about that the other night, because there are actually more typically abled people living there. There's only 3 people with disabilities on the half acre, and that's the 1 girl, the Down syndrome boy, and my autistic son. And then there's actually more typically abled people. But there's a couple things, I think for a lot of us, one of the reasons I was attracted to a licensed setting in the beginning is the fear of neglect, abuse, the unknown. And so you want this checks and balances. And then the other factor is, for a lot of us, renting a home with a HUD situation, the burnout factor is enormous. Just being alone with my son with no one else around, it stops being fun for that person. And so then you get into too much television or whatever you will. And so in this situation where we've got 3, 4, 5 typically able people at any point on the half acre, not that they're always all there, some people are working, but they're coming and going, and 3 special needs people there, like what you said, a different agency providing the staff for the 1 girl. There's a lot of eyes paying attention to what's going on. And like this morning, for example, we had an all compound meeting that included the special needs people. And we just read from a book about some inspiring stuff about Camp Hill. And that's kind of the philosophy that we're attracted to, because it thinks about things very differently than this concept of caregiver, versus not caregiver versus, life sharing, if you will. And so we had this wonderful, inspiring meeting. Yesterday, we actually had a 90-minute all crew cleaning morning. Every Monday morning, it's mandatory for everyone who lives there to be there for 90 minutes. And the whole crew just frantically deep cleans all the houses. And so there's a real kind of camaraderie taking place of people sharing their meals together. But once again, it's an independent living situation that is with roommates. That's what we're calling them. They're each other's roommates.
So that's really interesting, because I was always thinking that, yeah, it was so cool just to have a group home and then a care worker, and we've all experienced that our care workers come and go. And so it's very unstable. And, what makes the unstable worthwhile is when you get the love and the companionship and the friendliness. I don't mind if someone enters in and out of our lives if they're full of companionship and love. And it sounds like what you've built brings a lot of richness to the situation.
Thank you. And I think just the thought process is so different than your typical uh, group home mentality, in life sharing. I mean, when you see yourself as a caregiver, you're limiting the potential, in my opinion, of the person with the disability. When you're life sharing, you're commanding them to take more ownership in their house as a roommate. There's expectations, taking out the garbage, helping prepare dinner as a group. And the one guy that's kind of modeling that, we maybe at some point we'll get to talk to you guys, that graduated from the Camp Hill Academy, he said what he sees so often is a lot of patting. Now he's Russian, so I didn't know what he meant. I said, patting? What's patting? And he said, oh, you're my good friend, you're patting them, you're such a great person, and everyone with their own intention is being a kind person. But is that patting, that kind of we're good buddies, is that really inspiring our children to live more independently, to reach their highest potential, to extract every capability they could possibly have for loading and unloading the dishwasher, preparing their own meals, all these things that happen in a life-sharing home where every person is a full person on their own, and our job is to extract their highest potential, not to pat them, if that makes sense. It really hit home when he said that to me, and because we see it, and they're nice to our children, but don't we want more than they're nice to our children? I mean, I want my son to have extracted the highest potential for independent living he possibly is capable of.
Somebody made a comment, you can hear me, somebody made a comment in the chat that it sounds very much like Living Unlimited, Alex Krem's housing model in California. And someone in Kona, Michael Bennett in Kona is hoping to create something like that too. So that sounds exciting.
Well, okay, so a little bit of background. Literally, this journey has been my waking up to my son. The conditions of my son's group home after 7 years were not what I wanted for him. During COVID, they dropped all the staff and they never let them leave. And there was just choices being made that were not what I wanted for my son. And so literally my husband and I remortgaged our house and bought this property and fixed it up, and kind of handpicked 2 other families that I've known for 10 plus years. And I feel aligned with these families, and got the 2-bedroom, approved by HUD, because the one guy had a HUD. And then, we literally just built this life sharing, independent living environment, and everyone moved in the spring. And it's just a journey of what I call creating an ordinary life for my son. I like to think of his services with Medicaid. The purpose of those services is to give him as close to as possible to an ordinary life as somebody who's 30 years old without a disability that has similar interests. So if I take a typical 30-year-old man, what are they doing? They want to go to work. They want to hang out with their friends at night. They want to, go to the movies. And how do we create an ordinary life for our children? And that's what's motivated this journey we've been on this past year.
Well, what I learned in the last few weeks is that when we talked to Sandra, what affordable housing is, that I understand, is I always see these apartments, and then part of the apartments is for disability. But even if that's the case, each person in those apartments can call on their separate care agencies. That's what you were saying.
Yeah.
So whether it's in an apartment setting, in a walkable neighborhood like affordable housing might be, or you've got more of a rural idea where some parents might get together and buy a tract of land that could actually be divided up. And one of the houses could be multiple apartments for Section 8.
Mhm.
And then one could be a group home on the same property, which is interesting because all of us parents have different levels of care.
Right.
And that's what they call on the mainland now. They use the term levels of care, and they're not doing high functioning or low functioning anymore in the language. I think probably Kiali knows more about it than the language than I do, but and then
Well,
inclusive
and
housing is the newest thing.
in our property, the mortgage is being covered because everybody living there is paying rent. So we got the property and kind of masterminded the whole thing, but now the property's covered by just, a half dozen people paying rent covers the mortgage. And so is this also in an apartment building? And I think there's a lot of wisdom to the housing being independent from the services. And there's actually a trend on the federal level to amend the ADA Act, and I don't know how far they've gotten, but one of the things they're discussing is actually that the housing should be independent from the services, because the fear of homelessness is so huge that a lot of people will allow a certain level of abuse and neglect, even if it's very subtle, because they don't want to get kicked out of their home. So they're afraid to talk about, well, why hasn't my son left the home for 3 days, or those types of things, because they don't want to have no home. And so by keeping them separate, it does, I think it's a good trend.
Now, before we talk to Sandra, I wanted to say that I wasn't going to mention this, but I will. And we had a very small meeting with a wonderful parent up in Minnesota, who is kind of in our boat, but many, many steps ahead of us. And we had, Sandra was listening in on that phone call. We had DHS. And the reason for that meeting was trying to find out what data that we have dividing up the disability and dividing up the level of care to be able to go and speak to the affordable housing groups. But it turns out Hawaii is not gathering that information the way that we need. And I don't know if there's an easy solution for that. I just wanted to kind of update you that we had our first call, and we didn't really come to any action step at the end, but at least we discovered that the data is not being gathered and the way that we need, probably for funding streams. And we did discuss a private contractor who worked for the state of Colorado, and she's about $30,000 to do like a major, it's called a life study or a data study, and she gets the data. And as she was doing that in the state of Colorado, the funding streams opened up and they started getting housing streams from the federal government. Everything sort of got corrected. So a core of us are thinking, wow, is that the way in Hawaii to kind of, move forward, is, maybe raise the money for this person to come in? Because it seems like, I'm pretty new to the government, but if they're not already collecting the data, I don't know what's really going to change. And maybe I don't want to throw Sandra under the bus, but maybe she knows something. But it's kind of moving forward and getting funding streams for houses, whether it's something like Andrea is doing. They did get some money for their first group home. And so that was a tedious process, but then there's these new affordable housing projects coming along that theoretically should be giving 25% to disabilities, but that's not just autism or Down syndrome. It's, it's all kinds of disabilities. But now the affordable housing market and the disability market in Hawaii has never talked to each other before in a serious way. So we're hoping that the Housing Coalition can start, having these conversations. And so I wanted to quickly just let Sandra introduce herself. You're muted right now, but
All
if
right,
you,
so
Sandra's a mom, and also you could tell us about where you work.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm semi-retired. What I do with the Pacific Housing Assistance Corporation, which is a nonprofit affordable housing entity, is volunteer work. But advocacy and volunteer work, as many of you know, is a full-time job. It feels that way. And I also would like to add the caveat that I'm just beginning as a parent to dive into all of the details of housing and employment as well. And so I will tell you what I know, but I think there's a lot more expertise that you need to bring in. And Desiree Kameka, who is a consultant that Cynthia referenced, sounds like someone that has the background that we need to go forward. And I was so impressed with Sue Shimoda. She is an amazing model of advocacy that we should all follow. And Minnesota is light years away from us. Hawaii has a lot of work to do to get within striking distance of where Minnesota is at. So just quickly, I just want to say that PHAC, which is the affordable housing nonprofit that I'm on the board with, our board person is Nadine Nakamura, who is chair of the State House of Representatives Housing Committee. She's interested in disability housing and has formed a working group within PHAC that I'm helping to coordinate. We are looking at the special needs populations, what the demand is out there. We're tasked with looking at innovative approaches to serving those populations and coming up with some best practices and recommendations to the board so we can figure out how PHAC can play a role in meeting those many needs of underserved communities. I'm so excited to hear about Andrea's project because I think we need a lot of options for all the families who have varying levels of their children have different needs, and we all have levels of service that we need that can be very challenging to those who just need a little bit of support. My daughter is 33 as well. She is what used to be called high functioning, but she still needs support, and the executive functioning challenges are still there at her age. And on the other hand, we know of families, so we have a little support group of families, and we've all our kids have all grown up together, and some of them are needing 24-hour support. So there's a range of functioning out there, and we need to be able to provide options across the spectrum. So I did want to say a little bit, since Living Unlimited came up, we have been following that model because for those families who have the private equity to invest in lifetime housing, this may be a solution, but but it is true the services are separate from the housing itself. And I think there's one Big Island family that's trying to develop something near the Kona airport, and I'm not sure if Michael is connected to that or not, but
we are, but that fell through.
I see. Okay. So, there's the challenge in urban Honolulu, where many of our support group families live, is the finances are so hard to work up. Especially with the market being as crazy as it is right now, it may not happen, but there is a group of families that are interested in that model. I was really interested in the model that Cynthia had highlighted, Main Street in Rockville, Maryland, because it provides an only 70 units or so, 25% for people with disabilities, and the rest for just affordable low income, moderate income individuals, but it also has a community center that brings the community in for wellness workshops and cooking classes and that sort of thing. And I know we can debate things like inclusiveness, but it is, being part of the community, I think is the point. And being, having what Andrea calls an ordinary life, I think that's a good way to describe it. Have a life that is, free of any kind of limitations. I want my daughter to live to her full potential and have friends and, find work, which is a challenge, as some of you may know. And, to have, the kind of social life and that any other young adult her age has. So I'm going to put a few models in the chat that you might want to take a look at that have been of interest to us. They include Main Street Connect.org, which is what we've been talking about here with the community center that I think is really interesting. And then there's another development. Sorry.
When you're as you're looking for that, are you saying that in Colorado they built a funding stream? So there's a funding stream like a tornado, and then people who want different models can access that funding stream. And if we hire this Desiree contractor, that's what she tends to do in a state. She tends to get people talking to each other and getting the federal streams into the public housing and all of that. I kind of like the idea of, because, Patty might have a different vision for her daughter than Andrea or myself or Kaylee or anything. And if there are different streams, then they can put a project together and go out of that, seek funding from that same stream. Do you think that would work in Hawaii?
It might. I think if you're more coordinated, if you have more partners together, your chances of getting funding is better. And I should say that someone had mentioned Weinberg earlier, and my understanding is that they may be cutting back in Hawaii, concentrating more in Baltimore. But for sure, foundation money is out there, and if you go at it in a coordinated way, a collaborative way, I think you have a chance as any to get funding. And especially if you can develop some political network that can help you push through some of these requests. But again, what Andrea is doing on her own, I think it's really impressive, and that should be part of the options that we have out there for families that can, who have the resources, can get together and can provide this kind of community that supports all of their young adults. So I just wanted to mention a couple more models that I think are worth looking at Bethesda, Cornerstone Village. Seniors live with adults with developmental disabilities, and they live in a community. And I like this idea of bringing communities together that don't normally live together, because it can be very enriching, and they can support each other and provide for that kind of social interaction that you normally wouldn't get in a say a group home, for example.
And there is a lot of funding for senior housing.
Yes, and the idea is to be flexible about it. So you just don't have to be a senior. You could, if you have a senior who has a foster grandchild, for example, they can live together in a unit. Or if seniors can live with young adults who can help them with their chores, their grocery shopping, things like that. I think there's a lot to be said for multi-generational housing, bringing people together to support each other and to have a true community. And another model is First Place in Arizona, and a lot of people have looked at that, but it's a very expensive option. It's a least option. But what I like about it is the idea of integrating independent skills, training, and other community events into the whole, to that whole complex. And I think that's something we can look at, setting aside the funding, which I think in this case, would have to, something like that would have to be subsidized. At least government funding needs to be part of the picture.
Well, I went to First Place in Phoenix, and I'll just give you guys a summary. I did not walk away with a good taste in my mouth because it was made for the wealthy, the children of the wealthy. And I think in Hawaii, we want to do the opposite. We want to make things for everyone. But they started out being given an apartment, a one-story apartment complex from the city that needed rehab. And they got that for free. And I'll tell you, that was lovely. It was like, if you could just imagine a horseshoe shaped, apartments, 1-bedroom apartments. And it was wonderful. And they all loved it. And in the center, they had like a community garden, and it was it was very nice. And then, so they operated that for a few years. So someone, individuals were in individual apartments, and they got their own care. And and they had a community room. And so then they got sort of known in the community, and then they bought this land more in the middle of Phoenix, the city. And they raised money for like 5 years. It's called a capital, program. And they bought the land, and then they brought in more people, and it's lovely. It's really nice. There's a community on each floor. There's a community room and a game room, but it's expensive. And what if something happened? I mean, I'm a person that experienced a broken trust fund. So, what if you die and you think your child is safe for life? They're never really completely safe. And it was super, super expensive. So I think, like you say, we look at a lot of models and take the best from everything. But there unfortunately on the mainland, most of the really exciting models are for parents that have the money to buy into it. And I don't think that's our model in Hawaii.
Yeah, well, yeah, I agree. And for some, it might work, but I think our challenge here, at least on Oahu, is just the cost of land. And so we would, I think, if you want to go this route, is approach the counties about property that we could develop. And I don't, that certainly is an option and something we should pursue. But maybe the only thing we can do, and I think this is perfectly a perfect solution for a lot of us, is just to find a small property or buy a home and have 3-4 rooms, as long as you don't exceed, I guess it's 5 unrelated people in a home, that you can do what you want and bring services in. And I think that for places like Honolulu, where there's so few options, that might be just part of the arsenal of housing options we have out there.
And I want to bring in, just as far as the Hawaii revised statutes, it does say no more than 5 unrelated people, but servants are not included in the total. So, which is a kind of a funny caveat, because obviously we don't think of the support team for our children as servants, but the group home that went sideways, in my opinion, many years ago, had 5 residents and 4 people in the home. And the way we got around that was that the staff, so to speak, that were life sharing were the servants. And so we actually had 9 unrelated people living together in a life sharing capacity. And that was how we got around it.
That's good. That's good to keep in mind as
Yeah.
well. So I'm going to pass it off to you again, Cynthia. And if there are any questions, I'll try and answer as best I can.
Well, do any of you parents on the line have a question right now? Because we don't want the meeting to go too long, but we did want to introduce Sandra this month. And tell you a little bit, about Andrea's model. So I don't know if the Bennett family wants to tell us a little bit about their ongoing ideas, or if you want to wait till another time. I don't want to rush you into anything.
I'm Susan Miedema. I'm Michael's wife, Susan Bennett. But anyways, yeah, we've been working with the Living Unlimited group, trying to form an LLC to be able to buy a property that we can, have our family members live in with other typically functioning people and support servants or whatever. So, but it's really challenging right now. The real estate market is ridiculous. And so prices are really out of control. And for us to try to pick something up that has, a couple of houses on it it's really becoming cost prohibitive. And so I'm not sure what's going to happen, because yeah, it is a lot of money for everybody to buy in. 175,000. That's a lot of money. But if we can make it work, we have to figure something out. But that's all I know at the moment.
Well,
Are you,
thank
Susan,
you.
are you on the Kona side or the hillside?
Kona side.
Okay.
Yeah, we're part of the Kona, the Kokua Kona is our website. I'll put it in the chat box, so if you guys wanted to look at it. We're trying to copy the model from Living Unlimited, because that's really been a successful program on create something like that here in the islands. That would really be ideal.
Mhm.
And Sandra, you said before that Nadine, the representative, was on the housing committee. Can you explain what PHOC is?
So Pacific Housing Assistance Corporation is a nonprofit. It's a private group,
Okay.
company that has been developing housing projects since 1980, or they've been around since 1980. They've developed about 1,800 units across the state. They now have 14 projects that they manage and own, including the Manoa Gardens Senior Housing Project and a bunch of others that are especially on Oahu, but also on Maui, Kauai, I believe in the Big Island. We're developing a affordable housing project on the Big Island at the moment. So they come with a lot of experience in that way, and we're now are looking to actively look at developing housing for special needs. They have worked with ARC in the past, so they have that background as well. But we are looking to move in a more innovative direction, because I think families need that flexibility.
I would like to say, because the lady from Minnesota is not here, I'm going to do a little cheerleading for the townhouse idea. And what she said is she likes the idea of purchasing townhouses next to each other in a row. And they could be, some portion could be Section 8, but that's a very interesting idea, rather than high-rise apartments, if that, because of, let's say 2 people could be in a townhouse with their caretakers, and maybe I, as a mother, buy a place 4 townhouses away, and we're not far from each other. So that's one of the models they're using in Minnesota, is the parents don't want to be that far away from where the adults are living. So I don't know if that's considered innovative or not.
Cynthia, I wanted to make to mention too, I'm sorry, I forgot the name of the woman Bennett on the Big Island. That just, we were able to get $400,000 from the state GIA grant, that you can go online and look up. I don't know if anyone's told you, the grant and aid, that purchased the original group home that my son had. And we were very successful on 2 different occasions to get funding for a group home through the state GIA. The deadline is usually at the end of January, so the application is probably not online yet. However, you could look at former applications. So the first thing I did when I was writing the GIA is I started reading anyone else's proposal that had been approved that was remotely similar to what we were looking for. So just a tip if that might be helpful.
And is that for buying land or buying land in a house, or does it matter?
It wouldn't really matter. It's just called a grant and aid. And that's where your data, justifying why, if they get, 300 requests from nonprofits, why they should pick yours and fund it. But, I think that the housing conditions in the state, we know how bad they are for affordable housing, and then the disabled are pretty much the poorest of the poor. So it's not a hard sell, really. You just have to show that you know what you're doing and, and why they should give the money to you instead of someone else.
Could you put that in the chat box, please?
Yeah.
Thanks.
And
I just put my name in there too with Michael.
thank you. Thank you for saying that. One of the things we also learned is, I never thought about Section 8 affordable housing choice earlier in my search, but apparently a lot of states are having the children when they become adults, get on the wait list, because that is something that is a lot of these affordable housing projects have project-based vouchers that go with them. But some individuals, if you're on the waiting list and you get awarded a voucher, then that individual can walk away from and choose their housing somewhere with that voucher. So it's a little bit interesting to learn. So there's either project-based vouchers where you get into a building that has vouchers, or you get your adult child on the waiting list and they get awarded a voucher. And that voucher, I'm not sure about federal and state, but that voucher, let's say they could go into a building and then change buildings because that voucher follows them. Is that right, Andrea?
Yeah, so basically in my opinion, I've worked with about a half dozen people in my tenure helping them use a HUD grant. I have 3 people I'm intimately close with their families right now that are using HUD to pay for their housing. So every person, once your kid is, I believe, 16, get on the list, because the kid will have no income once they turn 18, because their income won't be factored with their families, and that the list can take, at least in Maui, up to 5 years, even though it is a federal program. My son's been on the list, got a voucher. We were happy with his group home, so we turned the voucher down. Now he's on the list again, so we'll see. But as I mentioned, the Down syndrome fellow, his rent can be up to $1,800 a month. He qualifies for a 2-bedroom because he needs support. Another fellow we work with also has a 2-bedroom with his cousin, qualifies for a 2-bedroom. And then the other girl, she moved into a housing complex that took HUD specifically. So we didn't have to find the rental or create the rental. And she's in a 1-bedroom by herself that's designated for HUD. And I think her rent can be up to $1,500 a month. And as you mentioned, Cynthia, the one Down syndrome guy, he just moved out of a HUD place and moved into our compound, but the HUD grant goes with him. Mm-hmm. And a lot of landlords are really scared about taking HUD, and it's just an education process. They don't care about.
That's really, I wanted to say this because I think this is really exciting. I know, Sandra, it's not really on your end of things, but let's say you have a house and you're an uncle or a grandma or a relative or a good friend, and you've seen a family struggle. You could actually kind of remodel a section of your house and get that approved quite easily by HUD. And that could be a Section 8 place for your nephew. You can't own the property and have your own child, unfortunately, be in the HUD.
Yes, no. So if we most likely will turn down the HUD again if we're still at the same property, because I currently own the property. So, but however, you could actually live with your son in another property that you rented, and you're the caregiver as the mom. That's actually allowed. So there's some different tricks to learn. But what you're saying is very true, because it's a federal program. And this is where a lot of landlords get nervous. They don't care about zoning. They don't care about any building permits, any building codes. They don't care about anything. Their list is a federal list that says that the outlets work. There's no rips in the screens. They're completely, the HUD inspection is completely independent of any zoning, anything. So what you're saying is true. Your neighbor could section off their master bedroom that has a door out to the patio and put a kitchenette in there. And even if it doesn't even have a real kitchen, it could be considered a HUD 1-bedroom dwelling or a HUD studio. The other thing that happened in Hawaii a number of years back, which this is because our housing conditions are so minimal, there's just nothing available. Hawaii is the only state that I know of currently in the HUD system where you can actually rent a room in a house and have HUD pay up to $800 a month rent for a room in a house. No other state allows that, at least as of last time I checked.
Well, I'm
So-
just saying, as a community, one of the things that we want to do on Hawaii Autism Foundation's website is we want to put a bunch of different either videos or slides, and we'll describe Andrea's project, and then we'll describe what another thing would be what affordable housing is, and another thing would be what Section 8 is. We want to be sort of educational about that to parents, because I mean, just what we said right now, I don't think hardly any parents know about vouchers and roommates and how to turn your house. And I mean, there's a lot of relatives that might turn part of their house and get it approved for HUD, and that would solve the problem for that individual. So working together is, I think, is really exciting, and educating ourselves. And so I don't want the phone call to go any longer. We're almost at an hour, unless someone has a very, very pertinent question. Does anyone want to ask something of either Sandra or Andrea before we say goodbye?
I just wondered, how did you get a voucher?
I was just typing in the chat. You need to get on the waiting list. So if you just Google State of Hawaii Housing and Urban Development Section 8 housing vouchers, they open the list up generally once a year, and they have about a 5-day window where you have to file your application for your daughter. And then they have a lottery, and you either get a letter in the mail saying, sorry, you didn't make the lottery, or you're number 546. And, and then you just, once you're on the lottery, once you make it into the lottery, then maybe once a year, so you want to email them and just say, what's the status? And, so that something doesn't happen and they send the letter to the wrong place. And then eventually you'll get a letter saying you have a voucher. And then you go to usually a seminar where they walk you through the requirements of how to use the voucher. And then you have, I believe, 60 or 90 days to find a place to rent. And then they'll extend that for another 60 or 90 days if there's extenuating circumstances and you haven't found a place. And then eventually you rent a place and HUD pays the rent.
So since she couldn't live by herself, it would be something that would be for a 2-bedroom place?
Yeah, you would qualify. You just need to get a doctor's note that says that she needs support, and then they give you a 2-bedroom unit.
And then you would have your healthcare agencies come into that 2-bedroom unit.
Yeah, so you could hypothetically live in the 2-bedroom with your daughter, or have her sister live there, or just a family friend. That person living with your daughter could work for an agency, or they might not work for an agency. Maybe their responsibility is just that they sleep in the home 6 nights a week and they're home at 7 p.m. in case the building catches on fire. And then you have a complete another set of people that come in to do the PAB work to help your daughter live independently through, whether it's cooking or cleaning or whatever. Or you could have the person living with you be the PAB worker. It's kind of wide open.
And so do they pay rent?
It really depends. As far as HUD goes, they do not pay rent, but there's nothing stopping you from, setting parameters that if you're going to live here, you have to be responsible 10 hours a week or whatever agreement you make. But as far as them participating in the actual dollar bills, they're not supposed to.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right, well, does anyone else have a question? Otherwise, we'll say goodbye to everyone. Hi, Deborah. I know Deborah's got a big weight on her shoulders, what she does. Did you have anything to add?
I just wanted to add, so I know the Bennett's from Kona, and I moved here 20 years ago because of housing. I didn't see a future for my son in Kona. And so I had to pick up and leave. Granted, my family is from the mainland, so they live there part of the year. And I was able to, as a teacher at the time, transfer my job, but most folks don't have the luxury of doing that. So I really feel like in my capacity with DD Council this year, housing is huge, and it's a big, big, big issue for our families on neighbor islands, for families living in rural areas, for families who want a different model, which I love what I'm hearing. My son lives in a licensed group home and is thriving, but that works for him. If at any time it didn't work for him, I would change it. So he's very happy and we're very happy, but it's a whole different setup over here in Oahu. And we're one state. It's supposed to be the same for everybody. So we're trying, and at DD Council, I brought it up. I haven't got much traction, but I do have, I have a meeting scheduled with Mary Brogan next week to bring to her attention some of this, and also families that have children, adult children with severe, severe behaviors.
Can I ask you a quick question? And it's
Sure.
not, I know you're not supposed to answer, you're not the budget person, but one thing the Minneapolis person said is she looked up the amount of money that the Disability Council gets given annually. And her question is, what would the Disability Council help us fund this contractor from out of state who can pull all the data together? Because really, Mary Brogan can give us the waiver data, and the DHS lady can give us her little bit of data. There's like Hakeem was saying on the Housing Authority, he doesn't have the data for the whole story. And this is what this outside contractor, Desiree, actually does. And she comes with really high recommendations. It's about a 6-month project. And
I'd have to defer to Daintree on that because
Okay.
I'm just volunteer, right, position.
Okay.
But yeah, and to make sure that folks know, you can bring it to the attention of the council. You have a
Okay.
voice. And I think it's really important when the legislative session starts up in January, that's the place to start. Our legislators need to know what the needs are. They need to hear all your stories. They need to see your kids' faces, and they need to know you're not going to go away. That's the only way change really happens. And we're lucky in Hawaii because we're small, and we have that opportunity. And you folks in your districts on the neighbor island, right? It starts there for you. But I think in order to fix the problem, we have to get to the root of the problem. And that is, there is just not enough housing for the folks, and we're not going to live forever. And then what? And then what? Right? It's their problem, no matter how you look at it. So you can solve it now, or you can solve it later, right? But later is going to cost more and it's going to be harder. So let's all be part of the solution. But it really starts with telling your story. I've been doing it. I've been sending it to folks for different things for my son. I get letter, and I send his picture, and, that's the only way it starts. We just all have to be persistent. So I'm just here to support what everybody is saying, and to let you know that it matters to me as the chair of DD Council. It matters to me as a parent and an advocate, and just trying to pull everybody together so that, many voices are heard.
Thank
So
you.
how do we start that? How do we get on board in January when the sessions are all starting? What do we do?
So contact your local representatives, right? You all have local, write to them. And then when the session starts up, that's a really great question. I am kind of learning it as I go, but I know that the DD Council does have a legislative liaison, and they do put all the bill, all that stuff comes out. So it's really getting connected to that. Even if all you do is go onto the DD Council site and look at the meetings and agenda, just download the stuff and start processing it. But it can happen. Look at Cal's Law. How long did that take? It took a while, but it's in place, right? There's the Medicaid look back, that's huge for folks on Medicaid, because Ian almost got kicked off because he makes $10.25 an hour and worked 30 hours a week. My goodness, but it doesn't happen overnight, and we have to, many voices are heard, but they don't know. And so we have to make sure that they know. Your local folks. I know a lot of you do. So just start pestering them, get an audience.
Well,
Bring your
right.
kids.
I'll add to that, we've done a number of GIAs that have been funded over the years. And that's the funding source that goes out to nonprofits, grant and aid. And after we wrote the application, they invite you to come and testify for 3 minutes to say why. But after that, many years I personally went, I don't know how personally you can do it anymore, but there's still a way to connect with these people. And I met with every representative and senator for Maui County. I met with every person that was on the Senate Ways and Means Committee and the Budget Finance Committee. I found their names, learned who they were, figured out if they had any connection to disabilities, and we went door to door in whatever capacity you can do that these days, and explained to them the need in our county, what we were doing, how if they gave us the $500,000 or whatever we were asking for, what we would do with it, how we could prove we were going to be successful. And we earned them so that when they saw our GIA among the other 300, they said, oh, I remember those folks. Yeah, I support that.
So we can have a housing meeting, before, when the time gets closer, and talk all about this in one particular subject. But so thank you everybody for coming, and we'll send an email out. If you didn't join the email list and you only registered, go back on that email and join the email link, and then you'll get the invitation next time. So. And hopefully someone else can host it, and we'll put a lot of new information out. Bye.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Cynthia.